All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is David Yang. I am here with Lesia Harhaj, who is our Director of Career Success. Let me put this up here. And just doing a quick test. All right. So, I think we're really excited today. We wanted to talk about the job search in the context of what's happening, in the world right now with COVID, the pandemic, and the response, and look at this from four different angles. So those would be, what's happened in the market, what are we seeing in the Fullstack data, in the general job search data, what we think is happening now going forward, and how the job market is changing. As we're now about 5 months into this since I would say the kind of peak March. And companies have adjusted, of course, and really changed their outlook on what's happening. And then we'll talk a bit about how Fullstack is adjusting its protocols during the job search, how we're helping students, and then finally some tips and tricks for what we think job search applicants can be doing to improve their chances of job search. All right, so how's it going? How's it going, everyone? Glad to have you all here. And Lesia, really glad that you're making time here. So let's see.
Yeah, super
Um,
exciting to be here and to do another one of these.
so let us get started on, why don't we just hear a little bit, how has the market been the last couple of months? What do you think, what are the trends that you've noticed since March?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely been a volatile period. I think, the one thing which we have underscored, I think, throughout all of our conversation with our current students, with recent alumni, with prospective students, is that we have all been in this together. And I think we've all been navigating this situation. I think when we first decided, and I think this was inclusive of Fullstack, when we transitioned into a remote environment, the main priority of a lot of companies was just transitioning into a remote space, making sure that their employees were set up to work remotely, that they had the supplies that they needed. So I think that was a priority that we saw on numerous executive leadership teams across the country. So I think getting set up in the first initial weeks of March was really the critical need, and everything else took a little bit of a back burner to that. The second one obviously became what potential revenue impacts would be because of COVID, because again, no one really knew how long this was going to be. I know, David and I have joked that we thought we would be back in the office in May or June. Obviously, it's now August. We're still here, and we've obviously been discussing at Fullstack what our long-term plans will be, and I know many companies are having the same issues. So obviously thinking about revenue, and especially if you work in companies where you are impacted by the work of your clients or grant money or anything where you depend on someone else to fund your organization, that is something that certainly was impacted very quickly, where people saw entire revenue streams eliminated, and then had to figure out how they were going to pivot. I remember one of the resources we've been using is the report, actually the Google spreadsheet put out by candor.co that was live in time hiring freezes, and the entire career success team was refreshing that page all the time because information was changing so rapidly. And I think we can share it, in the YouTube, in the show notes, but that's definitely something we still look at today to see, have there been any changes as people go through their processes. So I think those are really the biggest initial trends. And then I think we have also seen, companies and partners that we work with also be transparent about how their hiring was going to be impacted. We definitely saw a lot of partners that we worked with say that while these roles were still open, they were automatically pausing hiring until they could determine what their next steps were going to be, and then how they could prioritize things like, are they looking for junior and entry-level talent, or do they need to shift to some of the critical mid and senior level engineering positions they did, how they were balancing those needs to support the work that all of their teams were still doing. I think one thing we can recognize is that the work never stopped. None of us, we might all have stopped going to the office in a physical sense, but the work for most of us did not stop. So, how to pivot all of that. I think one of the things we did see is that for those companies that did continue to hire, salaries remained pretty consistent. I think we were still seeing most of our entry-level professionals achieving salaries between the 70K to 90K range, which is right in alignment with entry-level hiring. So I think that those employers who were committed to still hiring we're still maintaining those standards, those things that did not change. And we also saw a lot of employers still continuing on with their apprenticeship and internship programs. The structure of these, the engineers that are involved with them, the recruitment processes around that really enabled them to continue on if they had those programs established already. And then they would still end up with a pool of people to potentially convert into full-time roles when they're ready to bring them on. And then the last thing I think we want to comment on is just the industry response. Obviously, we were all hit, but certainly different industries were impacted in different ways. For example, brick and mortar retail, hospitality and tourism. We saw that those were some of the biggest industries hit when COVID initially broke out in March and the beginning of April. However, we saw a lot of our partners who are in the e-commerce space, the direct-to-consumer space, ed tech platforms, communication platforms like Zoom and Slack and Asana, those all can actually increase some of their hiring because they needed the teams on board to be able to increase user capabilities and bandwidth and streams so that now that all of us were at home, we would be able to use those tools in a way that were productive to the work that we needed to do.
Yeah, is there any way that students can think about the different industries and how they've been impacted? What can they research, if I'm thinking about technology, but thinking about specific industry, the impacts on it? Any tips or tricks there for
a couple of things.
that?
There have been a ton of reports that have been coming out. Dice.com is an organization that I read all the time. The Recruiter Index are things that we look at. Plus, we also look at just different kind of consumer reports. I actually think consumer reports itself is a pretty interesting thing to look at because it tells you kind of what's going on in the various different industry spaces. And then one of the number one resources we tell the students is subscribing to different newsletters and following different industry professionals on LinkedIn. I think the hashtag has become the driver of LinkedIn to be able to set alerts around thought leadership for industries that you're interested in. I know I follow a lot of people in the tech space to be able to look at that. So just setting up different alerts on the LinkedIn platform has been really helpful for us to understand how quickly everything is evolving.
Yeah, I think it's been a while since then, but just to recap some of the economic fear around the March timeframe, right? There was definitely just a sense of, let's not do anything net new, including hiring, and then the same teams that focus on growing headcount are also teams that would typically be involved in some of the HR decisions around rolling out remote work comms, and those teams are just really strapped doing that. So I think there was a period probably in that March-April timeframe where the job search just was probably totally fruitless of an effort.
Yeah, I think we definitely did hear from a lot of our students, unfortunately, which was certainly anxiety producing for them, that they were pretty far in process with companies, and those companies had to come back and say to them, look, we're pausing right now. We'll keep you posted. And I think that has been something both negative and positive for our community because the employers have continued to keep in touch with them. I think that that option of getting ghosted by a recruiter has not really happened because I think the recruiting population and a lot of the people ops teams have understood that, this was not anything that a candidate did. It's not anything that a people ops team did. And I think that has also been maybe a positive is that recruiters have maintained responsiveness with candidates, which I think even if the position never came back online, still ends up being a good experience and sets, our current alumni, even with the positive frame to say, what, I can bounce back from this. I can take what I learned and apply it to the next opportunity.
And when would you say, looking back, or if it has, the mood has started to shift?
Yeah, I would probably definitely say around the beginning of May and June. I mean, I think when we saw a lot more information coming out globally and nationally about reopening phases. I think when counties and states started moving into reopening, I think that gave people the opportunity to have a little bit of hope that we were going to return to the new normal and there was going to be movement because there were actionable steps. And I know we'll talk about actionable steps for job seekers a little bit later, but I think actionable steps for workplaces was also critical because there was this way to move forward. And obviously that has shifted for different states in the way that they're working. But I think that plan in early spring really started to push the conversations forward.
Yeah, I would say, similarly, just as an executive, you start to feel kind of hope in the reopening, or just ability to plan for the future around that time frame of, okay, we're starting to understand how this thing's impacting what's, and of course things are constantly changing, but we're starting to be acclimated to the new normal, I would say.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I definitely want to get back to the apprenticeship thing. We'll get back to that in the later segment. The next thing, okay, so I think that's a pretty good recap of March to April was companies were just in max fear mode, right? And of course max fear, we don't want to commit to, and also we didn't know how to do remote work, much less onboarding people in remote in a remote environment. I would say that since March though, even our company Fullstack has hired probably anywhere between 7 to 10 people now, and so they are now onboarded in a new fully remote way. All right, next thing I want to get into, what is the impact you think from right here? Like, what are you seeing in the data? What's the forecast for how the job search goes from here? So, for example, as we think about hiring, what do you think we should expect from over like the next 3 to 6 months, remainder of 2020?
Yeah, I think definitely I encourage all of our technologists to kind of think about both the market as a whole and then the technology market specifically. So obviously we have seen that unemployment nationally remains pretty high, and higher than we've seen, since the recession in 2008. However, there are organizations that are publishing Q2 earnings that, they're saying tech industry unemployment is actually at 3.7% unemployment, which is not a great number. Obviously, we would like to see it lower, and that's as of May 2020, which is actually down. So in April 2020, tech unemployment across the board, and we should preface this by saying this encompasses positions across the range, so anywhere from entry level to senior. That's down from 4.3% in 2020. We've also seen information continuing to increase about how many jobs are being posted. So looking at some of the markets where Fullstack particularly exists with our core programs and our university programs, we've seen almost double-digit increases in the number of job postings being posted. California has seen a 20% increase in tech job postings. New York has seen an 18% increase. Illinois, 26%. And that's just from May to June. And then we've also seen this positive increase in states where there were stringent lockdowns. So if you look at states on the East Coast, New Jersey, for example, where a lot of our New York searching students may end up, given the strength of the tri-state area, they saw an increase in 14% in jobs. And it seems to correlate that if you had a stringent lockdown, you were able to enter those reopening phases a little bit more confidently. And so employers felt more confident about releasing jobs and beginning this process because they saw positive steps.
And where were you tracking this information?
Yeah, so this information, again, has really been coming from a lot of our partners at DICE. Deloitte has published information on a lot of these different sources. So I think we've spent the last couple of weeks reading, what has been coming out in Q2. I think the one challenge is that all of the data is published retroactively. So we are learning about the Q2 learnings in the beginning of Q3, and we're, taking those to say this is the positive impact of those things. One of our recruiters on our team actually shared something also from the recruiter index on the recruiter side, and they were asked about their work job increases and how they thought their workloads were going to be increasing. And 68% of those recruiters who were surveyed as part of the recruiter index survey indicated that they were going to be seeing an increase in their job loads over the next 90 days. So I think it's definitely something that we're getting more positive information on.
So I'm not sure if this is based off data that we're seeing, but here's a question from one of our audience members. He's saying that he's perceiving there's a refreezing of hiring, and it seems like some jobs are disappearing the last week or two when we're seeing that last month hiring was surging. Curious if you have any insight on if you're seeing that, and if you are, any guesses to why that?
I think from some of the hiring partners that we work with, one of the anecdotes that I can share is that I don't necessarily actually think it's a refreezing of hiring. I think they're filling roles. I think we have seen, and I think because the both good and the bad part about searching in a pandemic is that most of our candidates are focused on searching. So because we're not able to go out and engage in our normal behavior, a lot of people are spending much more time focusing on job applications and reaching out and networking. And we've heard anecdotally from some of our hiring partners that they have been positively overwhelmed by the number of applications that they've gotten. And I think we also need to remember too, we are in the prime peak of summer. This is also when we graduate not only our students from Fullstack across our programs, but this is also when colleges and universities graduate the bulk of their graduates, and they enter the workplace for the first time as well. So summer is always a little bit of a unique time because there is always an influx of candidates. They begin to fill positions, and companies have begun to orient themselves to basically what will be their end of the year hiring. So I wouldn't necessarily categorize it as a refreeze. I think people are being cautious, and I think they're quickly filling the positions that they've had open maybe a week or two ago. And I know David and I will actually talk about that a little bit later.
All right, and then another question. This is a little bit, we can talk about this later, but I'd like to get to that, is that, do you think students who get an offer from company A, but are in the process of interviewing another company, should they first offer, or do you think it's worth waiting for? This is a pretty general question, I think, but
yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about this with students, especially for full stack grads who are often in process with multiple companies at the same time. The first thing is to kind of go back and understand, what company are you more interested in? Because again, while there is certainly anxiety and nervousness around accepting an offer, you should not just accept the first offer that you get because you're for fear that you're not going to get another offer. Things that we've recommended to students is to open up a dialogue with the second company. If you're really interested in them, going back to them and saying, look, I've obviously been interviewing with other companies, and I want to preface it by saying also, no company believes you're just interviewing with them. They've been doing this for a long time. They know that you're in the market for an open role. So we've encouraged our alums to go back and indicate to the employer, look, I've been interviewing with other organizations. They've extended an offer that I have currently under conversation. I'm still interested in company B and would love to continue my conversations with you. Is there anything we can do to expedite the timeline? Is there additional information that I can provide? What are the options here? Because I do want to consider, opportunities with your organization. You obviously should only do that with companies that you are very interested in. You should not game people against each other. And we say this across industry. Tech may seem very big, but tech is very small and the recruiting population is very small. So you want to make sure that you're behaving professionally. But I would definitely say, if you want to weigh your options, make sure you're having those conversations because you're going to need to take an input from those other organizations to find out what their timelines are going to be.
I think one thing a lot of people are asking and curious about is, and all of you watching out there are some follow-up questions. We'll try to get to them. I want to get through some of the other questions we've been sent. How do you think salaries will change in a world where there's more remote work, right? Companies are hiring, there definitely was a New York premium versus, we clearly see a New York premium versus Chicago, and then another premium in California roles. How do you think salaries will change as employers are, hiring for a fully remote world?
Yeah, I actually just sat on a webinar about this yesterday and have been discussing this with some colleagues in the space. I think this is something that we still have a lot of information to collect on. I think as companies are adapting to remote work, employers are going to have to differentiate how they establish their salary bands, what is included in that, how they characterize their employees within those salary bands. One, because they need to be consistent with their candidate pool. Obviously, what they tell an applicant who resides in New York may be different than what they tell somebody in Florida, but they obviously need to make sure that the process is fair and not discriminatory based on location. So I think there's a lot of benchmarking going on right now about cost of living, commuting, work-life balance, supplementing remote supplies, relocation stipends. So I think the industry is also in the process of going through that benchmarking exercise to determine what are the trade-offs that we may have originally included in a salary package. How will that look for remote? But I also have to think about, depending on how they're sourcing their candidates from the the pools that they're choosing from, the first question I would ask any employer who's working with us who may be located in a place where we have not traditionally sent students, but they're open to remote work, is understanding what is the median salary of a full stack grad? What have they traditionally been able to secure based on the skill set that they bring to the table? Is that something that the employer is willing to negotiate on in order to get someone who is performance ready? And I think that's always something that we advocate for with the employers we work with on the full stack side. And then again, negotiation. As you as the candidate, be up for negotiation, be obviously transparent about where you're coming from in that process. I'm actually really interested to see what learnings are released in Q3 and Q4. But I think the one thing we cannot 100% comment on is that I think companies are still trying to figure out if they're going 100% remote. I've been on some calls where companies have indicated, yes, we're 100% remote. We've certainly seen that with companies like Twitter, who don't have to ever return in an in-person capacity. But I think we've also seen a lot of employers who are still placing value on company culture in an in-person environment with remote capabilities. So that will also be a different conversation if you live within maybe 50 miles and can be expected in the office one to two times a month. That's going to be different than somebody who is 100% remote and the pool that they're choosing from.
And if I think about the decision tree that companies are making, I think right now a lot of companies are still hiring for the role, like you starting remote, but the role still says full stack software engineer, New York, New York, right? So that they're adjusting that role for the New York market. Twitter is saying they're going fully remote, but my understanding is that they're still compensating based off kind of SF salaries. And then, so I think the two branches are, is this company going fully remote or not? If they're not going fully remote, they're still hiring. You're still applying for a role in a city, even though you're not going to be working in that city. Yeah. And then if they're going fully remote, have they make a decision to adjust compensation by your cost of living or kind of by where they're headquartered? I haven't seen that much of that combination where companies are going fully remote and adjusting for your cost of living yet. I think that's probably the next thing to come down the pipeline is people saying, you know what, we're going to be a fully remote company. We're going to base the salary on your location. And we haven't seen as much of that yet, but it sounds like that's what's coming down the pipe.
Yeah, and I'm really interested also to see, I know we've been having a lot of conversations internally, and I know I've been having them personally about whether or not people are going to remain in urban environments. I think, the number one conversation, and depending on where you are in the country or where you are in New York, where we're based, is that you have seen a lot of mass exodus of people outside of the city because their companies have loosened the ties on that you do not need to be in the office every single day. So what will happen as the pool of potential applicants no longer reside in the place where your zip code is, and what flexibility, again, I think employers want to hire top talent. I think they are becoming increasingly driven to the argument that top talent can live in various places, but I also think it depends on the manager structure, the organization structure, the projects that you work on, how you work, all of those different things that I think are a little bit more intangible than just being in an office.
All right, this is another kind of $1 million question. Large companies like Google have declared they're going to be online to probably mid-2021. What's your guesstimate, or what are you hearing from our hiring partners on how long? I mean, I don't think anyone is in person right now on their perceived timeline of when they're going to have a return to work plan.
Yeah, I think anecdotally, I mean, we actually just pulled data on this. We were looking at the companies that have participated in our hiring days. So we only did one hiring day in person in February of 2020. It's actually February 25th. I remember because 2 weeks later we were completely remote. But of the hiring days that we've hosted in this calendar year, we've had almost 40 companies attend, and we've been asking them kind of, what is your return to work model going to be? How are you hiring for these positions? Only 5 of those companies have indicated to us that their roles would be completely remote. Everybody else has indicated that it's a remote to start with the intention to return to the office in some sort of in-person.
So the majority are still kind of planning on a return to work policy.
Yeah. And that's both. We host hiring days currently for our students who are job searching in New York and in Chicago. That is a cumulative. So we've seen overwhelmingly both from our New York and Chicago hiring partners that the desire is to return to some sort of in-person work environment.
Do you have a sense from them on any ETAs on the return to work? Or is it, I think one thing a lot of people are wondering is, well, if I'm going to work remotely for 3 months, then I should set up my life here. If I'm going to be working for a year remotely, should I live at home? Should I, live out in the country somewhere? Or, how can people think about timeline? And do we know anything, or do we?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I've heard anecdotally from a lot of our hiring partners is that a lot of it is contingent on school plans. I think because obviously a lot of the people who work in fields are working parents, working
Yeah.
families, and how they support that environment. And I think that companies are actually taking a lot of that into account because they understand that this, when everybody's home, it's not an ideal work environment. I would say probably the majority of people that we have spoken to have said that, look, they don't anticipate returning until the start of the new year. And I think a lot of people have shared, a lot of recruiters that we work with have shared that once more information potentially about a vaccine becomes available, when that will become, that is something that will probably drive their decision. But I think most companies have now also, for just the peace of mind of their teams and any prospective applicants, have mostly maintained that they will continue to be remote until the end of 2020.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, especially in the major cities. So I see a few more questions. I think a few of these we're going to address in the our final section about what you can do personally during the pandemic. But I want to move on to the next section. Is how are we equipping students to do a job search? And then in the final section, I'll talk about what students can do, or what people who are looking for a job can do to really amplify their job search, and in an environment where we're all working remotely and interviewing remotely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, maybe Lesia, you can talk about how has our career success strategy shifted during COVID?
Yeah, I mean, I first and foremost give major congratulations to our career success team, all of the coaches who are based in New York, our coaches for our university programs. This has definitely been an interesting environment to have to coach students in when so much is out of so many people's control. But I think the first thing is that we have there are a couple of things that we've maintained doing regardless of the pandemic. So I think the first to underscore is that we continue to assign our current students and our job-seeking alumni a coach that they work with until they secure a job. We are here for you until the end of the process. We will go through the process with you. I always like to joke that we will pretty much help you do everything but submit the applications and go on the interviews. But we are there every other step of the way, and we do that as students are in program. I think the second thing is that we have continued to expand. Fullstack, the career success team, functions in two environments. One is our coaching environment, and then the employer relations space, and understanding what's happening with our hiring partners. On the coaching space, our coaching team has been relentless in updating our presentations, our COVID job search pandemics information, our networking seminars. We were really excited to launch a digital and personal branding workshop that we are doing for our alumni. We have redone our entire processes on how we work internally with students. Obviously, we moved everything to a remote environment in early March, and that was a big change for us because up until that point, we had been working in person with our current students. We've been working with our alumni in a remote capacity, but our current students, we were always face-to-face. So the team worked really hard to transition to make sure that we would be able to do tech resume reviews virtually, that we would be able to practice pitches virtually, review all of those materials. So I really have to give them a lot of congratulations and a lot of support for the work that they did to be able to transition our job search materials into that space. On the employer relations side, again, we referenced kind of the candor.co hiring freezes. We were referencing that every day. And then we were immediately contacting all of our employer partners to kind of, one, check in with them and see how they were doing, because we knew this was a challenging time, but to also understand, how was hiring going to be affected? Were there hiring freezes? Was there anything we could be doing to support our students? And I'm happy to say that even though we have had some employers who have continued to pause hiring because of their own internal business requirements, everybody has been really transparent with us about saying that we do not see these positions going away. We just aren't able to hire for them in this moment, and you will be the first people that we call to put Fullstack candidates back into the pipeline. And then I think the third thing that we have been doing, particularly with the launch of Fullstack's live online program, is understanding what are pockets of the country that we need to be engaging in more. What do the job markets look like in those particular things outside of New York and Chicago? So that's a relatively newer approach to us as that cohort prepares to graduate in mid-September. But I think it's been something that we are expanding on, knowing that remote roles, relocation is going to become a bigger topic of conversation. So that's something we've also been focusing on the last few months.
Yeah, I think that is an opportunity of, working remotely. It opens up the pool on both sides, right? So there are places you can work at without necessarily leaving where you want to live, or you can separate the choice of where you want to live with where you want to work. And as someone mentioned earlier, right, sometimes getting your foot in the door is just as important as, it's really important to get your foot in the door, and so you can do that, in a much broader search area.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned on our earlier conversation is that a lot of companies are reopening up this apprenticeship model, internship model, right? And this is a trend that we saw even pre-pandemic that's been sped up a little bit. Maybe you could tell people here a little bit what that is and why companies are doing it and where they might find these opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. So these are apprenticeships and internships. And apprenticeships are a little bit different than the internship program. I think when people hear intern, it means that you're going to work over the summer or in a short time capacity. That has certainly still maintained in tech, but I think people are transitioning into providing a lot more structure in these programs. I think gone are the days. I remember when I was an intern, making copies and stapling and answering phones. I think now a lot of companies are transitioning into real work, that interns and apprentices are integrated fully into the teams in which they're staffing them. So I think some of the, I think apprenticeship programs have also become a real draw for boot camp graduates, particularly Fullstack graduates, for a couple of different reasons. One, there are a lot of high profile companies who understand that they have to pursue talent outside of traditional campus recruiting pipelines, so out of the 4-year CS degree program. So we've partnered and we work with companies like IBM and Spotify, and the Wayfair Labs program to be able to understand when they're hiring students and how students should apply to those kinds of things. Those kinds of programs also have a lot of structure, and that is really something that should be applauded from those organizations. They realize that people who may be entering the space as new professionals will need mentorship and support, will need a person that they can talk to when they need to troubleshoot a problem, will want to work on a team. So we've been really pleased to see that the way that these programs are structured is that they will onboard candidates as full-time hires, so that you won't be considered kind of a different class or a different kind of hire. You'll be part of the team that you're going to be on. However, there are additional support mechanisms available to you, whether it's the VP of engineering that you're working with, and then maybe it's another supporting engineer on the team who's there to support you. So in terms of sharing out those opportunities, we're continuously working with employers to understand our partnership with the Tech Talent Pipeline in New York City obviously gives us access to the Spotify apprenticeship. We are constantly looking when the new entry-level programs, things like the Wayfair Labs program, we partner with them and we're on their kind of communication list for when they're releasing those kinds of things. So companies are continuing also to understand how those programs may evolve and when they want to start them. I think that's also something that's been interesting for boot camp students, is that it again happens in non-traditional cycles. It doesn't happen, with a May or an August start. It's a program that can start in October and go through the end of the year. It's a program that can start in February and then go into the spring. So I think that's also been interesting, which maintains a lot of the alignment with when our students are graduating.
Yeah, I would say that the other thing a lot of people are concerned about is compensation. And my understanding is that these things pay on an annual rate, as they pay like entry-level developers, but what it really gives these companies is a chance to, quote unquote, I hate to say this for people, but try before you buy, so that they can not only provide you the mentorship, but also see if you have the right fit, see if you're able to grow into their organization. But they're not, compensated like, many people think internship or apprenticeship, you're being paid, very little, but these are typically paid. I think we look at the Shopify one is, 75, 80K a year, which is a pretty solid junior developer type salary.
Yeah, and we're really excited about those kinds of things. Like, for example, we are excited to kind of put our students into the Shopify pipeline for them to be considered and reviewed, because traditionally they've hired students not from the United States. So I think that also kind of goes back to remote work, to say how it opens up pipelines for candidates that they may have not considered. And I think gone are the days that, and I like the try before you buy. I think that has had a negative connotation for so long, but I think the recruiting space in general and recruiting in tech has realized that the last thing you want to do is spend a ton of time hiring candidates that you wouldn't want to convert to full-time. So it is a little bit of try before you buy to make sure that it's a good fit for both them and the candidate. But it's 100% the expectation is to convert to full-time, because those recruiters do not want to have to go back out and recruit again, because those headcounts don't disappear. Those engineering teams need to be supported. So they want to do the best job that they can out the gate. And then it also, again, helps prepare students who may be newer in the field to give them some of the support and mentorship that they need to be successful. And I think we've seen with Fullstack grads that is, they're ready to go and they're ready to work and ready to contribute. Sometimes that additional support is what turns them from a good engineer to a great engineer, because they are, again, having somebody who believes in them and supports them, similar to what we've done as part of our program.
Yeah, and I would say, yeah, it's just that you bring up two great points. One is it's try before you buy is a two-way street, right? Oftentimes. And that I think the other thing is that we've seen conversion rates to full-time employees to be very good, right? Sometimes there's a cultural fit, but very rarely is it a lack of technical fit. It's usually like a cultural fit type issue. I think this is applicable to, or maybe we can think about it from this perspective of full stack grads, right? But anyone who has a community. So if you're a CS grad and you have alumni network, if you're a full stack grad, you have your full stack community, or if you're any boot camp, how do you tap into that community to amplify your job search right now? Or how can the community help each other in a time like this?
Yeah, I think one of the most interesting things I've seen is that people have really kind of laid it out for each other to see. If you're active on LinkedIn at all, some of the posts, especially in early March and April, were heartbreaking in ways, as you saw people from all different industries lose their jobs, transition, things like that. But I think it is that openness that has allowed people to tap into communities, because at this point we are all in it together. And I think we've all seen the commercials where it's like we may be at home alone, but we are not alone. And I think that that's what you need to remember. And I think specifically for Fullstack, it's one of the values that we espouse. We figure it out as a team. I think that from the start of remote and all the work done by our program directors, program leads, our instructors to transition the educational experience to remote, to everything that we are seeing our career success team do in order to support students. It starts there, those foundations, and then expanding onto the fact that, yes, this is your full stack network and this is who you've learned here, but do not discount what you've learned from your previous professional networks, your personal networks. All of those things are open for you to be able to reach out. And again, we have been in this together. And I think people who have said, even if I had one coffee with you, how can I help you? How can I make an introduction? If I can do at least that little, I'm willing to do it, because I know that you need it and that you're a good person. And I think we're continuing to look at community here at Fullstack and how we can continue to engage with our students. One of the things we're most excited about is rolling out our Fullstack Together community, which is the new online platform we're going to be using to connect our alums from every cohort that has graduated, I think all the way back from 2013 to every cohort that will be graduating. So we'll have our web development students, our university program students, our cybersecurity students, and it's a community that's going to give you access to everybody to connect, to chat, to talk, to make introductions. We're really excited that we're going to be launching it shortly.
Yeah, I've noticed that people right now are very more happy than ever to jump into a Zoom and chat for 15, 20 minutes. And although Zoom is not the same as grabbing a coffee or grabbing a drink with somebody, it is, you can get pretty comfortable with people over that medium. And I think that everyone's at home, everyone's, bored out of their minds. And so, not bored, sorry, lonely out of their minds. And so I think people are more willing than ever to jump into a Zoom call. It's a much smaller ask than, hey, let's go grab coffee, right? That can involve half an hour to an hour Zoom call can be very quick. So I definitely think more than ever, reach out to people in your network. They're happy to connect, and oftentimes have a bit of extra time on their hands and a bit of loneliness too.
Yeah, we've seen so many of our students like pair programming together, working on different projects. I think when you and Nimit sent out the capstones for COVID projects, I think we saw so many alums band together who may not have been together in the last couple of months to be able to work on these things, and great things came out. So
that was amazing.
Being open to those kinds of things is really what I think gives people the spark to maybe continue moving forward.
What I want to get to next is, how do you personally improve your job search chances during the pandemic, right? So what can you do as an individual? So I think, well, why don't we start? Like, what are some actionable tips that you've seen people do that's making them more successful in the job search right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you have to have a plan. You have to establish, and that plan should be unique to you. Don't do what your friend or a colleague is doing. Kind of work through how you work best. Time management and organization are critical. Make a schedule for yourself, especially if you are, for our job seeking students, or for anyone who may be job seeking. Obviously, there is a lot of time, and it can seem like the day is very long. But if you organize yourself into a couple of hour bandwidth, to put a schedule together for yourself, that really will help you organize. We've seen, during the Career Success Review Day that we host for our graduating students, we encourage alumni and take them through kind of a workshop process to create a schedule for themselves. Indicate, that from at 8 a.m. you're going to get up. Maybe you'll get a workout in, grab some breakfast. At 9 o'clock, you're going to start sending out applications. You're going to do that for 2 hours. At noon, you'll take a lunch break. And then from 1 to 3, you're going to practice technical interviewing, whether that's through some of the resources that we provide at Fullstack, whether that's pair programming with colleagues of yours. Make that schedule for yourself, and then maybe you attend a networking evening event in the evening, a virtual one. So that really, I think, allows people to organize. It also encourages you not to burn out. The job search can be long, it can be lengthy, and it is time consuming. So we want to encourage students that putting that together and setting some actionable goals for yourself, whether it's 5 to 10 job applications, or whether it's 2 to 3 reach outs a week, or scheduling 1 virtual coffee chat. Set reasonable goals for yourself and then go from there. I would definitely also say, and this is a key component of the career success strategy, is that do not just send out cold applications. Do not blast your resume to 100 jobs a day and then wonder why you haven't heard back. This is where networking really plays a critical role. You should be choosing jobs that you would want to go and work at. You should not just be applying for the sake to apply. You can do a couple of quick applies. LinkedIn's got the really good easy apply feature, but you should be choosing jobs that you're interested in, because that's going to come across in your materials. So make sure that you're attending networking events virtually. Make sure that you are following up with recruiters. The good thing is now, and I think we've heard this from a lot of our recruiting contacts, is that they are also at home. So they are also glued to their computers as applicants are, and are able to be a lot more responsive and follow up. Sometimes, they can't be as responsive, but I think we've definitely seen an uptick in that. But networking and connections and follow up and finding out how you may know somebody in that field or at that company through your own personal or previous professional network, that is an invaluable thing to be doing. Every job you apply to should have some sort of networking follow up attached to it, whether it's successful or whether it's not, because the more you keep on doing it, the better your chances will be in terms of connecting with someone and then having that next step conversation.
Yeah, I would say that one thing I've seen more and more is that applying for something and then getting someone internally to email that recruiter that you is a huge thing, because now every company now is adding like internal, external email, right? And so seeing internal email talking about job applicants can be really powerful. I think the other thing I would add is that I really encourage students to be more willing to organize activities and organize events, because like I was saying earlier, people are looking for things to do, right? And so one alum that I think about, I think her name is Talia. Yeah, she organized something called NYC Coders, which I think is become like a huge group of people, right, who are really passionate about teaching each other how to code. So you can either organize something like that or get in touch with those kind of people, because they're, she has a full-time job. I'm sure she's very busy, but being able to, hey, say, can I organize a I'm going to teach a topic, or we're going to all do a hackathon or something. That can be a great way to network. And I'm amazingly surprised by how little kind of actual energy it takes to unleash a whole bunch of interest, right? And so no one wants to be the first person to say, hey, let's do this. But if you're that person, if you can muster the courage, a lot of people want to do those things, right? So think back to the days when everyone's kind of at a standstill. If you just throw out, you know what, let's go to lunch here. It was like, okay, we're all excited to do that. So definitely take take this opportunity, I think, to organize, mini conferences, virtual Zoom conferences. They're really easy to coordinate. You don't have to get space. You don't have to get anything. Tech talks, webinars. If you email, I tell Fullstack alums, if you email the Fullstack alumni mailing list, I'm going to teach a 30-minute section on, intro to TypeScript, why I like GraphQL. You're going to get a huge number of signups from people who are both working and not working, right? And that's a great way to network and get your name out there. So definitely take time to do stuff like that.
Definitely.
Here's a question. Love to get thoughts on is, a lot of people, it's just no fault of their own, right? Just bad timing. You graduate right during 2008, 2001. I remember I went to CS and I went to college into the 2000, and then the 2001 .com crash. I mean, luckily for me, it was like I was going to do computer science anyway. Like I didn't care what the economy was doing, but it's you graduate during a market. You feel like it's bad timing in the market when you graduate. How do you restart a job search, or how do you? Because people feel like there's momentum, right? How do you recapture some of that momentum in your personal job search?
Yeah, I love this question. I mean, and I can definitely empathize with that. I was working for a real estate law firm in 2008. Don't do that.
Ouch.
You not have a job. But that is how I ended up working and transitioning into higher education and the career success space. I would have never done that had I not been laid off from my job. And that's how I, eventually the path that led me here to Fullstack. And, Mogan Subramaniam, our COO, he tells the same story during hiring day when he comes to do the welcome. And he finished his MBA in 2008 and entered a job market that was like just, absolutely collapsing all over the place. And he now references some of his fellow classmates who have gone on to do and run companies. I think he references someone he worked with or he went to MBA with, who they started Rent the Runway. So I would often tell students, and job seekers, one, it may seem in the silo that it looks really bad. But remember, your career is long, the job search is long. So a couple of the things that we have told our job seeking alums to kind of drill down on is understanding what have you been doing. And I think the good thing is, and we've talked about this, is that people want to do things and people have been doing things. It's just how do you pivot those things into being something that can talk about your skill set. So participating in virtual hackathons, working on different COVID projects. Capstones for COVID is a great example of that. We have had so many alumni who have become active in social justice initiatives over the last 2 to 3 months. Working on apps, setting up different contact information lines, contributing to organizations who are doing grassroots organizing. All of that should be a part of your conversations with employers, and all of that should be included in your resume. It's similar to how we talk about capstone projects with our students. Talk to me about what you did. Talk to me about what you contributed to that and how that will help you do something potentially for an employer. So make sure your job search materials reflect what you've been doing over the last 3 to 6 months, because we've also heard anecdotally that the hottest interview question is going to be, what were you doing during the pandemic? Because everybody's got a war story to share. Everybody wants to connect on that way. And again, it also helps evaluate culture fit. What have you been doing? Were you just sitting around? And I think our students and our grads are definitely people who are not. So one, I would also preface it by saying that if you're a Fullstack Bootcamp student, get back in touch with the Career Success team. We are here for you. We are here to support your search. We are still working with employers and sharing that information out there. If you are maybe a prospective student or somebody who is currently in the search, look at your networks. Establish what industries you're going into, establish kind of the positions that you're looking for, start mining your connections. Who may work in a company that you want to work with? Who may do a job that you're interested in? Set up informational chats. This is another great time. Everybody wants a 15-minute break during the day. Everybody seems to be more willing to help, but make sure that you're ready to go in the job search.
All right, that's great. I think I want to get to some more tactical stuff. How do you show a company that you'd be good at remote work, or how do you differentiate as someone who would be a good remote person?
Yeah, this is something that's been coming up a lot, especially for our students. And I know one of the things that we have talked about is how pair programming as part of our program has really been a defining factor for that. And one of the things I know you and I have talked about is that we kind of use the OODA loop in this and talk about, and that's defined as observe, orient, decide, and act. And these are skills that technologists and software engineers should be using when you are tackling internal problems at your organization, capstone projects that you're working on, hackathons, things like that. You want to observe your problem. You want to be able to understand what is the problem, and you articulate that to an employer. You then want to orient yourself, like what is going to be, what are your potential courses of action? How can you potentially move forward? Then you decide. You're going to decide, what the solution is going to be. You're going to start maybe thinking about the code that you'll be writing, and then you move into the act process. One of the employers, where we've been partnering with has shared that sometimes they'll actually hire employees mutually. They'll hire two people in a job and they will actually be teamed up together to work and program simultaneously. And our students, I think pair programming shows how you can collaborate, how you can communicate, how you can drive a solution forward. So I think using any aspect of the Fullstack Academy experience really does show remote work, whether it's the Reactos that we've been doing as part of our teaching, working on projects, all of the things that are embedded into our curriculum.
Hey, Lesia, you there?
Yeah. Oh.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Ooh, one second. Am I? Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, apologies. I guess my AirPods ran out of battery. So that's a great segue, and I did not do that on purpose. How do you do well in an online interview? So obviously, don't use AirPods that are low on battery.
Make sure they are charged. Yes, make sure they are charged. So yeah, I think definitely a couple of the things you want to think about is your environment. Silence all of your notifications. Make sure all of your family members are outside of the room. I see my cat like slowly approaching me, and I'm just like, you got to stay away. Although I'm sure he could photobomb. You want to make sure video quality is good. Make sure your camera works, it's clear. Microphone, obviously, test everything out in advance, and then make sure you're prepared with your materials. You will have obviously sent a copy of your resume to the employer beforehand, but they may not have it accessible. They may kind of lose track of where the document is. Be able to screen share, be able to, quickly email a copy of your resume. And then especially in technical assessments, you may be asked to pull up a whiteboard and code a couple of lines. I think Fullstack students are uniquely prepared to do that because that's part of what we do in class. So make sure that all of your tools are ready. You're using the platforms that you want to use. And then I am still a bit of a traditionalist. Make sure you have pen and paper available so that you're not necessarily typing and not paying attention or not catching every other word of what the interviewer is saying. Sometimes the old-fashioned ways still do work the best.
Yeah, I think one thing I would also add too is invest in a $10 USB to Ethernet dongle. I think if you're in an apartment building, everyone is using Wi-Fi. It's really not that good for latency or for stability. So find out where your router is and plug a wire into it. I think people who do that definitely it's a leg up in terms of video quality, audio quality, etc. So having a good environment and making sure your technical stuff is set up is important, because no one wants to hire in a remote environment the person with choppy video, choppy audio. One thing that we've seen some interesting data on is just that interviews are happening at a different clip now. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how that's changed recently.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to the question that one of our participants asked earlier, that is it a hiring freeze or what is it? Is that these interviews are when a company is posting a job, they are going so quickly now. One, because it is so much easier to schedule. You are not looking at vacation or who's got this meeting. Everybody is at home. Everybody is working. So companies, as they begin to understand and evaluate candidates, will start scheduling phone screens and technical assessments really easy. They will also send out, I think a lot of our students have indicated to us that they've been getting coding assessments at a much faster clip.
Yeah.
than they would have been getting. And then they usually have, a couple of days a week to be able to complete those things. I think we have definitely seen what has traditionally been maybe a 6 to 8 to 12-week process go all the way down to a 3 to 4 process. One, because of the speed of interviewing and being able to coordinate all of those schedules. And two, because of the necessity to get those people in the door, get them onboarded and get them working, has been that business need portion of it, is that we do not have time to wait to kind of drag this process out. I think recruiting teams and engineering teams have aligned on that, and are making decisions really quickly.
Yeah, I think that's one thing I've seen with several of my contacts is that, they slowed down, but then business actually didn't slow down, right? For them, many of them sped up, and then you have this almost unreleased pressure of we got to get people in, 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And then also, you're right, scheduling Zoom interviews is a lot easier than flying people in across the place or getting everybody to have the same schedule.
You don't have to worry about commuting anymore, or like trying to get. I remember when I interviewed at Fullstack, you show up a half an hour early to make sure you can get in, use the restroom, if you're in the summer, wipe the sweat off your head. Like, all of those things don't apply really anymore. Now you just have to make sure you look presentable from the top up.
And it's great for companies too, for coordinating. You don't have to, you don't have to feel bad about bringing in someone for 2 3-hour sessions instead of 1 6-hour session, right? Because they're not commuting. They can just, so it's easy to coordinate. It's hard to find 6 1-hour blocks of interviews, but not too hard to find 2 3 hours.
100%.
I'd love to end on a question. What, I don't know, maybe what is a mental model that people can have to, or what can recent grads do to really stand out right now?
The first is believing in yourself. And I think we like to say at Fullstack, from the time you come to us, whether it's through one of our interface prospective student events, to graduation, to when you are on the job search, we are continuously telling you to say, I am a software engineer, because that is what you are. And that is how you are. So I think that mental model of preparing yourself that you are successful, that especially if you graduate from one of our boot camps, you have done the first part. You have done the first part, and you are ready now to move on and to say, I have the credentials and experience that are going to make me be successful in this space. So I think that is the first kind of thing that we can do. 2 is engage in some of those job search practices. Put yourself out there, comment, engage, connect with each other. Unfortunately, we're not doing in-person events anymore. So you're not looking somebody in the eye the same way you would have been if you went to an in-person networking event. So be bold in the fact that you do need to put yourself out there a little bit, but I even say for some of our introverted students, the digital space makes it sometimes a little bit easier to do that, because you have the computer in front of you. And then be ready to move. I mean, if you are out there looking and an employer wants to talk to you, remember, they've looked at your resume. They've seen your experience. They think that you can do this job. Believe that you can do that job, and make sure you're answering their questions and engaging with them in the best way process. Employers do not reach out to people that they don't have interest in. So when you get somebody who reaches back out to you or asks you in for an interview, say, okay, there was something in my experience and my credentials that they thought is going to be a good fit for this. Let's see where it goes, and take it step by step, because that's what the interview process in the job search really is.
All right, thanks so much.
Yeah, of course.
And thank you to everybody out there. I think a few questions I want to address from the crowd. One, Daniel, 2 companies from Hiring Day who feel they're in a hiring freeze are outliers in the space. I think it's really hard for us to, Daniel, if you're a full stack grad, why don't you shoot us an email of the companies? I don't want to call any companies out on stream, and then we can reach out to them and see what's going on behind the scenes. So even if you're not a full stack grad, why don't you email us? We'll see if we can help you. Because it's hard to say, right? There are some companies who are, still in a adjustment period, and some companies who are growing. So Daniel, please reach out to us. You can email. I'll put. You can email me. It's just david@fullstackacademy.com. I'll connect you with Lesia and reach out to you.
Yeah.
And then, I think integrating onboarding is something else. Maybe we can do another session about onboarding successfully in a remote work, because I think someone else mentioned that it's difficult to integrate with a development team, in pandemic mode. In terms of, another question here about enrollment. Enrollment for us is similar, right? Like in March, there was a dip as people were kind of adjusting to a new normal. I would say that there are still people who are investing now in changing their careers, and we've seen enrollments return to what I think are pretty strong levels. I think, people are realizing that this is not a flash in the pan, and you can't put your you can't put your career on hold forever, right? And so you gotta learn this at some point. So yeah, enrollments are out there. I don't think it's not crazy. Like it's not like everyone's going back to learn to code. So I think that the market is still, we're still in a pretty good equilibrium point. But yeah, I don't, it's hard to say because some areas are growing so quickly and some areas are still calibrating. All right, so thank you so much, Lesia. This has been a great session. I'm sure this will have a lot of long-term value for everyone. And thank you to all the people who are watching and asking great questions. And if there's other stuff, feel free to leave comments below. Things that you left for us to talk about are topics for us to explore. We're happy to jump back on and dive further into these topics.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, David. Thanks, everybody.